the road of fire and faith. Along the ancient stones of the Via Salaria, where Roman legions once marched and the cries of martyrs echoed like thunder through the centuries, two names remain engraved in the eternal memory of faith: Biagio and Diogenes. They were not warriors with swords, but warriors of the soul, armed with prayer, compassion, and a courage that no empire could extinguish. In the shadow of imperial power, where the gods of marble watched over a city of pride and conquest, there rose a new kind of flame, gentle, invisible, and unstoppable. It whispered through catacombs and glowed in the hearts of the persecuted. This was the flame of Christ, carried secretly from home to home, from soul to soul. Biagio, a healer of bodies and a shepherd of souls. Diogenes, a Roman soldier turned servant of the light. Their paths crossed not by chance, but by destiny, a divine script written in the ink of sacrifice. Together, they would walk the Salaria not as fugitives, but as witnesses. Together, they would face the wrath of emperors and the silence of death, only to be crowned with glory not of this world. This is not just a tale of the past. It is a living echo of faith, of courage, of miracles woven in fire and blood. It is the story of two saints who, even in death, walked forward into eternal dawn. Welcome, listener. The road awaits. Chapter 1. The Lantern and the Lion. In the golden haze of a fading Roman sun, the city bustled with all its familiar arrogance. Stone arches casting long shadows, merchants shouting from crowded stalls, and centurions clanking down the roads as if time itself obeyed their stride. But beneath this veneer of order and glory, something unseen was stirring. A whisper in the dark, a light behind closed doors. In a modest chamber on the outskirts of Sebaste, far from the Senate and statues, lived a man of peace and power, Biagio, a physician by trade, a bishop by calling. He healed not only wounds of the flesh, but those deeper, quieter ones that lived in the soul. They called him the Lantern, for in times of chaos, his presence glowed with a gentle certainty, a light that never flickered even when the storm raged. By night he preached in secret. By day he walked among the poor, laying his hands on the sick, the outcast, the forgotten. The empire had begun hunting such men, calling them enemies, rebels, fools. But Biagio knew a greater truth. The kingdom of God was advancing, one hidden prayer at a time. It was during one such night, when the moon was pale and low, that Biagio's path crossed with another destined for glory, Diogenes, once a soldier of Caesar, now a seeker of truth. He had laid down his sword after witnessing a Christian martyr face death with a peace that shook him to his core. It was not weakness, he realized, but strength unlike any he had seen in battle. "Your eyes," Diogenes said when they first met, "they do not fear Rome." Biagio only smiled. "I do not serve Rome." From that moment, a bond was forged. Biagio, the lantern; Diogenes, the lion. Two spirits lit by the same fire, burning for justice, for mercy, for God. Together, they moved through the hills and villages, proclaiming the gospel with words and deeds. They baptized in rivers at night, gave food to the hungry, and comforted those broken by chains. The people whispered their names like secret prayers. But Rome listened too. Word reached the ears of a regional governor, a man whose heart had turned to stone, who feared what he could not understand. He ordered spies to follow the two men. He decreed that such blasphemers should be silenced forever. One evening, as Biagio was praying over a fevered child and Diogenes stood watch at the door, they heard the sound. Boots. Dozens of them. The hammering of fists against the wooden door. The sharp command. "In the name of the emperor." Biagio turned, calm as still water. "It is time." Diogenes gritted his teeth. "We fight." Biagio placed a hand on his shoulder. "No, we witness." They were taken in chains down the long road, the Via Salaria, a path soaked with the blood of saints. But their heads were high, and their eyes filled not with fear, but with light. They sang hymns as they walked. People watched in awe. Children cried. Mothers wept. And still they sang. In the heart of an empire built on conquest, two men walked like kings, not of earth, but of eternity. The lantern glowed. The lion walked beside it, and their story was only just beginning. Chapter 2, Chains of Glory. The prison was carved into the stone like a scar. Cold, damp, and swallowed by shadows, it was meant to break the spirit long before the body. Yet within its walls, something impossible was happening. Hope was taking root. Biagio and Diogenes were thrown into a cramped cell beneath the barracks of a Roman outpost near the Via Salaria. Guards mocked them, spat at their robes, called them traitors to the empire. Yet no insult stuck. Their peace was unshakable, their silence more powerful than any retort. At night, Diogenes would pace the floor, remembering the clang of swords and the thrill of battle. Now he fought a different war, one of endurance, of silence, of mercy. "They think these chains bind us," he said one evening, "but I feel lighter than I ever did as a soldier." Biagio sat beside him, hands folded. "Because now we carry only what matters." Even in prison, they ministered. Through iron bars and cracked stone, they spoke to other prisoners, murderers, thieves, slaves. They prayed with them, healed wounds with whispered blessings, and told stories of a kingdom not built by Caesar, but by grace. Rumors began to spread. A blind man in the neighboring cell claimed he had dreamed of a light that touched his eyes and awoke seeing shadows for the first time. A feverish child, visiting her imprisoned father, was healed after touching Biagio's cloak. One of the guards, hardened by years of cruelty, sat in secret to listen as Diogenes spoke of forgiveness. He wept and returned the next night. But not everyone welcomed their light. The regional governor, Marcellus, furious at the growing influence of these holy men, demanded their execution be public. "Let their deaths be an end to this plague of Christian foolishness," he ordered. Soldiers came for them at dawn, but found the cell filled with song. "Who sings in chains?" one asked, unsettled. "Those whose chains are made of glory," Diogenes answered, stepping forward. Their march to judgment echoed through the valley. The people, hearing of the sentence, lined the edges of the Via Salaria. Some bowed in reverence, others stood in silence. None dared speak. The two prisoners walked barefoot, their robes torn, their faces serene. Biagio turned his gaze to the rising sun. "Do you see it, brother?" he asked. Diogenes followed his eyes. "The light beyond the walls?" "Yes," Biagio smiled. "We're almost home." When they arrived at the judgment post, Marcellus stood tall. "Do you deny this Christ and beg for mercy?" Biagio spoke first, his voice like wind over fire. "I do not fear man's judgment when I serve the eternal judge." Diogenes stepped forward. "You ask for denial, but we offer blessing. May your heart be softened before the end." Marcellus trembled, not with fear, but with rage. He gave the order. Yet even as soldiers dragged them to their punishment, chains clinking like music, there was no fear in their steps, no hatred, only the quiet certainty of those who know death is not the end. And so, the lantern kept burning. The lion did not roar, but bowed his head like a king. The chains that held them became relics of glory. Chapter 3, The Healing Flame. Even in the shadow of chains and the threat of death, miracles were born, like sparks igniting a flame that no darkness could quench. Biagio, known far and wide as a healer, carried not only the skill of the flesh, but a power whispered to be divine. His hands, gentle yet strong, seemed to hold the very touch of grace. One cold evening, as the winds howled along the Via Salaria, a desperate mother arrived at the prison gate. Clutching her son, her eyes wild with fear, she begged for mercy and healing. The child was choking, a cruel thorn lodged deep in his throat, an invisible enemy stealing his breath and life. The guards, hardened by years of cruelty, sneered at the woman's plea. But when Biagio stepped forward, calm and unwavering, something changed. The air thickened with a sacred silence. The mother's tears glistened under the flickering torchlight. With tender care, Biagio lifted the child in his arms. He whispered a prayer in a language ancient and forgotten by the proud men who ruled Rome. Then, with a steady hand, he reached into the boy's throat and pulled out the thorn, sharp and cruel. The child gasped, then laughed, free from pain for the first time. News of this miracle spread like wildfire through the villages and towns along the Salaria. Pilgrims came by the thousands, seeking healing for their bodies and hope for their souls. Biagio never turned them away. His presence was a beacon, a living flame. Diogenes, once a soldier who wielded the sword of battle, now carried the sword of spirit and faith. He tended to the crowds, offering protection, guidance, and encouragement. Where fear once ruled, courage blossomed. Together, they became legends, the healer and the warrior, the lantern and the lion, their story told in whispers and shouts alike. But miracles stirred envy and fear in the hearts of Rome's rulers. The governor, furious that these men drew the people's devotion away from the emperor's gods, vowed to end their influence once and for all. Yet, even as threats loomed, Biagio and Diogenes remained steadfast, their faith a fire no decree could extinguish. One night, as they prayed beneath a sky heavy with stars, Biagio turned to his friend. "The flame within us is no mere light," he said softly. "It is the breath of heaven itself, and it will burn forever." Diogenes nodded, his eyes reflecting that eternal fire. "Then let them try to douse it. They will only feed the blaze." The road ahead was dark and uncertain, but their spirits blazed brighter than ever. And with every healing touch, every whispered prayer, their legacy grew, not just as martyrs, but as saints whose flame would never die. Chapter 4. The Crown Beyond the Stones. The dawn broke cold and merciless over the Via Salaria, casting long shadows across the ancient stones, witnesses to countless stories of glory and despair. On this day, the road bore silent witness to a final journey, a passage not of defeat, but of triumph beyond the grasp of mortal hands. Biagio and Diogenes, worn yet unbroken, were led once more in chains, not as criminals, but as champions of a faith that even the empire's iron fist could not crush. Their eyes, burning with unwavering resolve, scanned the crowd that had gathered, faces etched with sorrow, hope, and reverence. The governor Marcellus stood before them, his voice harsh and commanding, but beneath his armor lay a trembling unease. For he had witnessed something impossible, the light in these men's eyes, the peace on their lips, even as death approached. As the sentence was read, Biagio raised his voice, not with anger or fear, but with a calmness that silenced the crowd. "We die not for ourselves, but for the love that conquers all, love that cannot be chained, caged, or killed." Diogenes stepped forward, his gaze steady. "Let this day be a testament, not to Rome's power, but to the kingdom of heaven, eternal and unshakable." The soldiers carried out the sentence swiftly. The stones beneath their feet seemed to tremble as they faced death, not as victims, but as kings crowned by their own sacrifice. Their final breaths whispered prayers, their last glances lifted toward a sky opening wide. And then, the impossible happened. A sudden stillness fell over the Via Salaria. The earth seemed to breathe. Witnesses spoke of a brilliant light surrounding the martyrs, a fire not of destruction, but of pure, radiant glory. The wind carried a chorus of unseen angels, singing songs of triumph and peace. The stories grew in the years that followed. Tales of healing springs where their blood touched the earth, of voices heard in the silence, and of miracles that could not be denied. Pilgrims came from afar to walk the ancient road, to feel the sacred presence that lingered like a whispered promise. Biagio, known forever as the healer and protector of those in peril, especially children suffering from throat ailments, became a beacon of hope throughout Christendom. Diogenes, the lion who laid down his sword, was remembered as a soldier of peace and unwavering faith. Their legacy was sealed not by mortal hands, but by the eternal crown awaiting them beyond the stones of the Salaria. As you, dear listener, journey back from this story, remember this. True courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to stand for what is right, even when the road is dark and the end uncertain. The lantern still glows. The lion still roars in hearts that dare to believe. Their story is our story, and it lives on. Epilogue, the eternal flame. The road of the Via Salaria may have grown quiet, the footsteps long faded into history. Yet the fire kindled by Biagio and Diogenes burns on, an eternal flame lighting the hearts of all who dare to carry their courage, their faith, and their love. May their story inspire you, dear listener, to walk your own path with strength and hope. For in every shadow, there is a light waiting to be kindled, and in every soul, the power to become a saint. Thank you for traveling this ancient road with us. Until the next journey, keep the lantern burning, and may the lion's roar echo within you. Forever brave, forever free.